Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and here to continue our set of season reviews. Tonight, we're going to talk about the inside linebacker position, and joining me for that is Jason Smith. Jason, how you doing?
Doing very well, Ken. Thanks for having me on, and great group to talk about.
Always a pleasure. At Huddle It Up Films on Twitter/X. If you want to follow him, he's got great draft content coming up. Always someone I talk to about the draft at least a couple times per year in terms of stuff. And let's talk a little inside linebacker position here. The Ravens were healthy this season, which is a damn good thing because they were a committed nickel team playing two linebackers every snap.
Yes. And it was a good look for the defense. It really was. It ended up working out really, really well. Two players that made the Pro Bowl, all pro, and they really relied and kind of ran their defense around that position in many ways.
Little minimal time. We'll be talking about Trenton Simpson, but minimal time in week 18, a little bit of cleanup time. Otherwise, you're the thing. And the camp star, Delshon Phillips, who was a terror this summer and played a huge role on special teams. He played a little bit during the season, even a little more than Simpson did as a backup inside linebacker. But those are really the four guys we're going to talk about. A lot of people ask, what about Malik Harrison? We're going to talk about him with the outside linebackers. He's kind of reshaped his body, played almost exclusively on the edge this year. Just really a couple snaps in that AFC Championship game that you would call inside linebacker snaps. You may see him posted up somewhere else, but effectively, if he might have been off the line of scrimmage, that was because the Ravens had no edge on that play, and he was just a couple of yards off. So we'll leave him for the outside linebacker group. I guess the big other news is graduating to be the defensive coordinator from the linebackers coach, and how schematically that might affect the Ravens going forward.
It's a huge question, and I love the Mike Macdonald defense. Obviously, the result speaks for itself, but, just philosophically, when you went from a guy like Wink to Mike Macdonald, the style of attack changed. And I was a big believer, and even more so now, that, Wink's defense worked great against average teams, average quarterbacks. But when you went against the Mahomes, the Burrows, the really smart quarterbacks, that you were playing with fire, and you can't really try to out trick them as far as bringing numbers. Mike Macdonald's defense, obviously you're showing one thing, doing another. So you are playing head games, but you're not sending major numbers. Blitz rates are much lower. And so I think that Zach Orr will build upon what Mike Macdonald has done. I don't expect this to be like an old school Wink or Rex Ryan type defense.
So certainly at least two elements there. We'll start with the sending numbers on the blitz. I think you're right. I think they're more likely to go with what they did in terms of the fewer numbers that are more reminiscent of Macdonald than Wink. I also think they'll keep the too high shell for the starting position, rotate out of that and do things. What's great about the Ravens and the continuity of the Harbaugh era in general, and I know Harbaugh has his detractors, but he hired all these guys, and he's done a very good job of incorporation and having an organizational memory of things that worked. If you look at the offensive side of the ball, they did a good job of not tossing out all of Urban's run concepts, and Monken has kept some of those. And the Ravens continue to be the best running team in the NFL, even though they now run mostly out of 11 instead of 21 or 22 or 12 or whatever.
Right, and that's what gives me confidence with Zach Orr. Obviously, losing Mike Macdonald is it's scary. We don't know. And, considering that how historical this defense was last year, I mean, it would be reasonable to expect us to take a step back, the Ravens on defense, just because it's hard to hit 400 past the month of April. As a baseball reference for you, one that you've brought up to me before. It was just a great year. But, listening to Zach Orr and putting it together, and something that he has emphasized many, many times is that the defensive plan was a collaborative effort among that all-star coaching staff that they had, and he plans on keeping it that way. So if Zach Orr was involved in the game plan to begin with, week-to-week basis, sculpting game plan with Mike Macdonald, I don't see it changing night and day from one year to the next. I think they're going to have the same approach. Zach Orr mentioned that in his press conference. And again, when you have a linebacker like Roquan Smith and somebody, I believe, waiting in the wings and Trenton Simpson, who can do a lot of the things that Patrick Queen can do, just from a stylistic standpoint, I think the defense will be pretty much the same. I think the big question, something I wanted to ask you about tonight is, do they go back to a dime defense, or is this going to be a committed nickel team with two linebackers on the field all the time?
We can toss that out right at the beginning. I think that a couple of things about this. Zach Orr obviously came from a committed nickel defense under Pease, with him being the committed part of the nickel, the weak side linebacker playing the extra downs. That would be one likely case that they would stick with a committed nickel scheme. And then, of course, just last year, the success of the committed nickel with those guys, I think almost like the fastball was pressure for Wink. I think the fastball for Orr is probably going to be starting with a committed nickel. And if that doesn't work out, I think they could change it, because we don't really know who Trenton Simpson is yet. And he's going to direct a lot of the traffic in terms of what they have to play this next year, whether it's they need a run stuffer to supplement what he does, whether they need a pass rusher to supplement what he does even on some downs, although I think that's the least likely of the cases, or whether they actually need a dime linebacker in there, whether they need a safety to come up and handle the coverage element because Simpson just isn't up to it. I think any of those at this point is possible. I don't think we know enough yet, but Simpson, at least from his college background, his background at safety, I think brings more to the position from a coverage standpoint likely than some of the other guys they've had in the past.
I totally agree. I think you put it well, and that they're going to want to start as a committed nickel team. That's going to be their ideal goal, and they'll be able to pivot off of that if Simpson's not ready in certain aspects of the game. But like you said, if it isn't broke, don't try to fix it. I think that they can replicate a lot of what they did last year on defense overall. The big key to me would be Matabike in the middle brings an element that it's hard to replace. He's kind of the missing link in there. I think he helps the edge rushers. You saw career years from Clowney and Van Noy in the sack production and the pressure production. And a big part of that is having Michael Pierce commanding double teams and Travis Jones commanding double teams and Matabike wrecking shop in the middle. So stay strong up the middle. I think that was enforce things to the flat, Ken. Just overall thought. It seems like that's where the league's going, force things to the flat and let these linebackers and Kyle Hamilton clean up. And the Ravens did a great job of that last year.
Kyle Hamilton is the ultimate weapon versus small ball offenses because he controls the strong side of the football field. He's an excellent tackler, block shedder, gets in the way of passes, tips them to himself for interceptions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of things he can do to help you there. But let's get back to the linebacker in general and how they performed the 23 season. I think lost in what went down in terms of the Ravens' kind of change of identity to be allow a little bit more against the run and stop the pass in exchange. The schematic choices that they made to stay too deep most of the time and dare the other team to run is the fact that I think the linebackers both had pretty good years of run defense in terms of being quick to the ball. And they really had to be, given they were facing a lot of 12 and doing it with, what effectively is a committed nickel team that was usually two up front.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the part of the Ravens' philosophy of giving up some rushing yards to be able to defend the pass had to do with those linebackers. And of course, the big guys up front, but we're focused on the linebackers here. And I have to throw Hamilton in there. But I mean, when you have Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith, and Kyle Hamilton, that's a pretty heavy seven in the box for considering 7. So it allowed them to play the pass very, very well and still be able to maintain versus the run. And you mentioned, the small ball that Kyle Hamilton takes away. Same thing with those outside runs, Ken. You run an outside run to his side, he's blowing up any kind of wide receiver trying to block him and just tackling him. So the range of Roquan, PQ, and Kyle Hamilton allowed them to play the defense a certain way. And, it'll be interesting to see how Trenton Simpson fits into all that next year if PQ does graduate and make the money that he's expected to make.
Yeah. And I personally think that's extremely likely. Stick a percentage chance on it that he stays. How about that?
I'm not going to say 0 because that's just a bad answer, but I would say I'll give it 20%. I don't really believe that number though. I'm just going to be honest with you.
I was going to say 5, and then I wouldn't be off by more than 5.
Right. I mean, Ken, just real quick here.
Yeah.
He's, we talk about Lamar say, well, hey, Roquan brought back that Ray Lewis juice that we were missing. And you hear the whispers. It's who's the Ravens linebacker? It's Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. It's not Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith. Somebody's going to look at PQ, see what a good player he's turned himself into, and want him to lead their defense. And then from a personal standpoint, if you were Patrick Queen, would you want to be here and be the other guy, or would you want to go take control of your own defense and start making your own legacy? And oh, well, PQ wasn't good until Roquan came, all that chatter that people have, whether it's correct or not, you want to put that to bed. So I think from a personal standpoint, there's a good chance that Patrick Queen himself wants to go and make a name for himself elsewhere and be the lead dog somewhere.
I think that certainly is very reasonable. I think all things being equal, I think if it were the same money, he'd be crazy not to stay in Baltimore and continue to be the weak side linebacker. But that's not happening. I mean, it obviously wouldn't happen. So if he's really looking to make about, somewhere between 65 and 80 million, let's say, over the next 4 years, I think he's got to go somewhere else to do it. And I think that there are a few teams that have some cap space and can make that kind of a commitment. He probably would have to be the guy. And that would be the one question I would have. Is he really ready to lead the gap selection process the way Roquan has here since he arrived to stop the run in his new place? And there it's probably the area of his game where I think he's relied most on Roquan. I think he's become a good coverage guy, great downhill player all by himself. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But in terms of that particular part of his game, I think that's probably the weakest element he's still got left. And it's not like he's terrible there. He's okay. I just don't think he's great yet.
I can't pick on PQ at all. I think he's come such a long way, Ken, from the discussions that we had a few years ago. And it's just my opinion. I know that there are people listening that their priority would be to sign Patrick Queen and to keep that strength a strength. And, if that's your opinion, that, you're very entitled to it and I respect it. I just personally, with the money involved, and again, the point that I made before, maybe Patrick Queen wants to go start his own legacy somewhere and is tired of hearing about how, Roquan made him and this kind of thing. There's a good chance that he's confident in himself that he can be a Mike somewhere and he doesn't care about what anybody else says. So, very, very, a lot of respect for Patrick Queen. Hats off to him. He's turned himself into a great linebacker.
That's fair enough. And, don't want to diminish in any way his growth as a player over his 4 years, because he's a pretty terrible player when he first joined the Ravens and really looked like a darn awful draft pick at that time. And I know, part of not picking on the guy is not to talk about how bad he was, but I'm really not doing it to do that. I'm doing it to talk about how much he's improved as a player since that rookie year. Really, the second year wasn't a whole lot better either. So the improvements he's shown has been very dramatic over the period. And,
another thing, tough player, Ken, never misses practice. He's always in there, beat up, playing through stuff. So, as much as, I just go back in the discussions that we've had where we were so frustrated, especially in the coverage and the missed tackles, some of the things that Patrick Queen has really come a long way on. So, yes, much respect to the guy. If he's your favorite player and you're listening, I totally understand why. Great teammate, tough player. I just, as far as what I think will happen, I don't think he's coming back. I would say 0%, but I want to give it, that's kind of maybe an unreasonable answer. That's why I threw the 20 out there.
Okay. Well, 20, you can't be off by more than 20.
There
5,
you go.
I'm thinking I can't be off by more than 5, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's really 14 and who knows? All right. Let's keep going. Talk about the individual players a little bit. We'll talk about Roquan first, if that's all right. Really well-deserved All-Pro nod. 92.3% of the snaps. He did sit out the finale against Pittsburgh, had some Yeah, the guy played through some nagging injuries, was in a harness for the latter part of the year at least. So he wasn't playing unding the whole year.
No, definitely not. And I think you could tell. I felt like I could tell it was a little bit harder for him to get off blocks later in the season.
Mm-hmm.
It was uncharacteristic from the Roquan that we saw the last 8 games or whatever it was last year, and then earlier in the season this year. He was hurt. He was definitely hurting. And you never heard it. It never really reflected in his play overall. But just a small thing that I noticed is I thought that he stayed on blocks. He was getting blocked a little bit more down the stretch. So as scary as it may sound to the others, he can play better. I think even better than he played this year. But man, his missed tackle rate you have down here is 6.7 missed tackle rate is excellent. And one thing, I mentioned, or you mentioned earlier on the channel, it's highlight season. Released Roquan Smith's highlights. They're unbelievable, like they were last year. But how good he was in coverage, Ken, and how many pass breakups, and how he's always in the right spot. Was a play at Detroit where there was a breakdown at safety, and he's carrying a slot receiver all the way down the field, 40 yards. I mean, the man has some range. He doesn't look like he'd be the fastest guy, but he has got a lot of range and a very good coverage linebacker.
Yeah, he was outstanding. That really showed up in some of the metrics that you'll see there. 7.0 yards per target is okay for inside linebacker. It's not great. Linebackers, by the way, if you don't know, since they face a lot of the check down passes to running backs, which have a very high completion percentage, typically give up a high completion rate. But usually it's short passes, and oftentimes they'll make downhill plays off of that. Roquan allowing 7 yards per target. He also got beat some where the Ravens are weakest with their too high shell, which means he's covering for somebody who's for a receiver that's between level 2 and 3 in zone. And so oftentimes the way PFF does it anyway is they'll ascribe that target to the underneath player, which typically means that Roquan is going to pick up some targets where it was a really tough cover for him in zone defense to get charged with that. But it is what it is. And that's why you see a higher ADOT figure for him. So his average depth of target was 5.5, whereas Queen's was much shorter, 3.8. A lot of Queen's responsibility was coming downhill on running backs and whatnot. Queen had a terrific 4.3 yards per target for the year. So if you relate those two, obviously, you first thing you'd say is that it looks like Queen has been a much better coverage player. And I guess what I would say is I think it's a little less obvious to me that that's true. I think they were both very good. And PFF graded them both very good, but I think that Roquan certainly had the more difficult coverage assignments and more total probably as well because they used Queen a little bit more as a pass rusher.
Absolutely, and Roquan will also be asked. In my opinion, I've seen it more. Like you said, Queen, pretty much assigned to the running backs. A lot of plays you could tell it's PQ's responsibility is to be all over the running backs, whereas Roquan had to take a deeper drop a lot of times in his drops. So, if you're taking away that intermediate pass over the middle of the field, they have to check down to a running back who happens to be in your area, in between you and Patrick Queen, and you get there first or however it's charged. I thought he was great in coverage, and he made a number of plays, tip passes, defense passes, and just deterring the quarterback from going to the middle of the field, stuff that doesn't show up in the box score, forcing the ball somewhere else. So I thought Roquan did excellent in coverage.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I sometimes it's a case of the defense is going to find your weakest spot anyway, so they may try and go after you at certain places. In the case of Brandon Stevens, he's very heavily targeted this year. I wouldn't take that to mean Brandon Stevens isn't the Ravens' best cornerback still. But for whatever reason, they didn't go after Darby as much. I think that as the field is split, as I look from the quarterback's point of view here, it was typically it went too high. Williams on that left side as the quarterback views it, the right side of the defense from the defense's point of view, and Hamilton or Stone on that right side more often. Now, not always, but I'd say that was the more likely starting position of the two. Do you get the same from watching film?
But like Brandon Stevens was over on the right side of the defense a lot by himself with just Marcus Williams behind him. And then of course Stone when Marcus Williams was out. But I kind of wonder if Kyle's presence on the strong side of the defense just made Brandon Stevens the easy target. And I don't have the numbers for this. Maybe you do, but it seemed like Brandon Stevens was targeted a lot early in the season and less so late.
Yeah, absolutely. And he still was among the tops in the entire NFL. But at one point, he led the entire NFL in targets, and he had a few less late. He was giving up a few plays late in the season too, but and had a few penalties. But honestly, had a great season. His development to me was along with Linderbaum's pass blocking, the single greatest improvement on the Ravens. That includes players like Madubuike, who had a breakout year and did a lot of things very well. But what Stevens and Linderbaum did in their respective individual things is just remarkable, given where they started from.
Yeah, kind of lucked into it too, because I was kind of miffed when Harbaugh said Brandon Stevens going back to safety.
Yeah,
and I'm like, why the heck are we doing this? He just played 4 or 5 outstanding games at the end of 2022 at cornerback just to finish the season strong, and now we're going to move him back to safety again, and then. Luckily, Harbaugh's vision didn't come true because we lost a lot of corners at the beginning of the season, and now Brandon Stevens is an established NFL corner. So Harbaugh lucked out on that one.
I had a friend who would say, and honestly, circumstances conspired for that to be starting, but Harbaugh should not be blamed for that. I mean, it's under Harbaugh's general level of supervision, whatever you want to give him credit for with regard to the defensive backs or the management of the coaching staff or whatever you want to call it, that Brandon Stevens ends up as the starting right corner playing every snap. So if you're going to blame him for everything that goes wrong on the football field, then credit him for that as well, is all I'm saying. So, but I had a friend who used to say, I wish I didn't have to hope for circumstances to conspire for my manager to do the right thing as a baseball thing back in the time. And that's what you're talking about, I think.
That's what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about. Yeah. Now, if we could only got Ben Cleveland at left guard, those situations didn't conspire the right way, but
yeah, well, there's something they may know more than we do for some. Well, I'm sure they know more than we do, but they're privy to a lot of additional data points from practice that we are not. I'm a little bothered by that part of Harbaugh as the doghousing of certain players that never seem to get out of it. I don't know have you seen Ben Cleveland? I mean, the guy looks like an Adonis now. He's not the big fat guy who showed up after he got married. He still probably only weighs about 15 pounds less, but it's all muscle now. It's transformed a lot of that. And I think he's going to get his chance next year. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he probably will. But yeah, Ken, sorry to sidetrack you there, but yeah, the whole Brandon Stevens that we're going to move him back to safety. As hard as it is to find outside corners, you know what I mean? That bothered it. And then why say it in the first place? Why even say it in the offseason? Like
just let her ride. And nobody even knows most of the time exactly where people are playing. Somebody puts it in the sun and says, yeah, he's been playing a lot at slot corner. They're even told, writers are told not to give away information like that. And it's, how do you make it happen? You ask someone at the podium, hey, we've been seeing Brandon Stevens a lot on the outside. What have you been seeing there, kind of thing? You put it on the public record like that. But if it hasn't been done like that, you're really not supposed to say anything about it.
Right.
So, yeah. Anyway, Roquan, getting back to him for a second, really great diagnosing and coming downhill. And he was another of the really good reasons. Queen had a great year doing it, but Roquan did too. And Hamilton did too, in terms of really choking off that small ball game. And it's a great in division weapon against Joe Burrow in particular, because Joe Burrow's arm strength is not of the type that he can throw the ball, like an arrow, whatever, that beats two safeties in the middle of the field. He has a real problem with windows closing on him for interceptions on deep balls if the safeties are both watching the same movie. So if they're playing zone defense, there's a real chance that the ball's going to get it. Sure enough, Stone had that big pick against him in the first game that helped win that one.
Absolutely. I love the way, back to his run defense though too, the way he presses the hole and is able to scrape and stay disciplined in it, but also take educated guesses as to when this thing's breaking down this running back is not cutting back into my gap. He's got a wide open gap to where he'll make plays in the other linebackers' territory as well. And I think that also shows up his instincts as far as the pass rushing. Like I think sometimes he's not a quarterback spy because it'll be a pocket passer. But the way he's got a sense of when that quarterback's got to roll out, okay, I need to stay in my zone. I need to stay in my zone. Okay, I can't let this quarterback just sit back there or else it's going to be a big trouble downfield. Let me go ahead and rush the quarterback and force his hand. Just the little things, the instincts that Roquan has in all aspects of the game, run game and pass game, just shows up all the time.
Yeah, outstanding. We saw some of the game situational awareness in the famous let the guy get up with like 2:10 to go in the half. I think it was of the game, half of the game. Forget. I think it was a half. I think it was a half. And regardless, it doesn't really matter. But he let the clock run down effectively to the 2-minute warning at that point, and just was one of the truly brilliant plays you'll ever see. And the great thing about that is, now when Roquan calls for accountability in terms of game awareness out of the other players, they have to listen because he can point to this level 3, incredibly intellectual play, awareness of football, high football IQ play, let's call it. And then you have Flowers, for example, on the other side of the ball. It's not completely under the Roquan umbrella, but Roquan is perfectly able to go over to Flowers in the locker room or even on the sideline and say something we need to. Made some not very smart plays as a rookie. Happens a lot. No, we're not throwing away Zay Flowers over this, but he scored once when he shouldn't have when he got the first down. The Ravens had a chance to kneel the clock out. That's all they needed to do. Bad football play. Okay. And he went for a touchdown himself. That was the finisher at the Chargers. And then, he did what he did 2 different plays here at the end of this game. The first with the taunting, the second with the fumble. When if he had been a little bit more situationally aware, he would have realized, hold the ball in tight, just get the first down in that situation. It's 9/10 of that value that I can harvest there. But, it's the kind of thing that a Roquan Smith now, he's demonstrated it on field in terms of his situational awareness. He's free to go to any of those players and have that conversation now. Like, hey, look, I know you wanted the touchdown. Let's talk about this and what it means to play team football.
Well, absolutely. And, he's got the money to back it up. He's paid. He's a Raven. He's got the play on the field, like you're saying, to back it up. And he's got the personality to be able to do it. So it's the perfect mix of where he's kind of a force multiplier of himself. There's, he's not a quiet guy who's, a paid leader. He's really got it all. He's really got it all from a teammate standpoint. And, he's one of the rare guys, I think, that could connect to anybody on any group, any position group on the team. And even Lamar, to go up to Lamar and say, hey, Lamar, let's do this together. He's got that kind of respect and cachet, and he's just that kind of leader.
Yeah, I certainly hope that Simpson is going to be able to follow Roquan's lead. Obviously, he's the most natural mentor possible. And by the way, a lot of times, I'm not this guy's mentor. He might be taking my job. Well, there's no danger in that in this case. Roquan Smith has already been paid. He's got pretty much all the money he'll ever need. I think we can fairly say that. But even if he were to sign another contract sometime, it won't be Trenton Simpson who takes his job. Trenton Simpson, being a better football player, I think can only benefit Roquan Smith in the ultimate prize of getting a ring at this point. A natural mentorship relationship there. I think he has those natural leadership qualities, and he can hopefully have him go through the growing pains of adapting to the NFL and do it as quickly as is possible in his second year.
I kind of feel strongly about this, Ken. So I think Trenton Simpson is going to do more than fine next year. I think that there will be, of course, first year starting. He's going to make mistakes. There's going to be, he's not going to grade well every game, for instance, but he has got a huge advantage over where Patrick Queen was in this point in his career, in his second year. Number one, he's got Roquan next to him. So it's not a situation where, hey, Trenton Simpson, we're going to need you to be the mic of this team, like they were asking Patrick Queen to do. Well, this isn't working. Let's bring Josh Bynes back in. All that uncertainty. Trenton Simpson is firmly going to be learning from Roquan. He has Roquan to take that responsibility of the linebacker room, to lead that group. And then secondly, he had more college experience than PQ.
Yeah.
And I think his coverage chops are better than what PQ's were coming out. I think he's a better tackler than Patrick Queen was when he was coming out, a more sure tackler. I think he's got more hit power, just as much range as Patrick Queen. So I think skill-wise, he's there, but most importantly, he's going to be entrenched next to somebody who can really take him under his wing. And, to add to your point that you threw it to me on, Roquan loves playing the game of football. It's very evident to him. Winning is very important to him. His brothers on the team are very important to him. He's not the kind of guy that's going to be threatened by Trenton Simpson. He's going to want to help Trenton Simpson be, the best linebacker duo in the NFL, just like they were last year. So, I liked what I saw from Trenton Simpson week 18 versus Pittsburgh. Cut up of that game of him is on my channel for anybody that wants to check it out. But he's very physically gifted. He's a very willing tackler. We saw that on special teams, a very physical guy, maybe a little undersized, but that's what you get from linebackers nowadays. The big linebackers have kind of disappeared. And I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be good for us next year, Ken.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk a little PQ, then we'll come back to Trenton Simpson because we're really reviewing the 23 season here. But I agree. Now, let's see. Yeah, I thought I remembered this, but Trenton Simpson lists currently at 238 pounds. Are you buying that? So I'm not.
I think he's lighter, but I think he hits like a ton of bricks. He's got that like build that just. Yeah. I don't know. Like he's got some power to him. I've seen people ascribe him as being too light or he needs to put on weight. And I don't really see it. I think that he's going to be as physical as we've seen from Patrick Queen, as far as he's not going to get dragged. You know what I mean? That Trenton Simpson is just not that kind of player. I saw enough of it in college. He's getting the best of contact and saw it on special teams.
Okay, back to Patrick Queen now for a second. Sorry to bring that up again, but very solid fourth year for the Ravens here. The coverage, just an improvement of orders of magnitude from, year three is kind of broken up for him, although he started to certainly play a lot better coverage last year. It was there. We kind of were on him about the dropped interceptions, but the truth of the matter was he was getting in position to make plays on the football, that's all you can really ask. And hopefully, well, that's not all you can ask, but it's a big part of what you are asking for. And the fact that he wasn't able to convert those into interceptions is disappointing, but at least it's, gives you reason to hope that second part is going to come along.
Right. He was in the right spot. You have to be in the right spot to be able to get the interception. So that was a step up, and, he was eventually able to settle down and finish those plays. So, but yes, I think last year was a big, 2022 was a big year for Patrick Queen. And then this past season, 2023, he just took off. Yeah.
Much better year. And I think, one thing we saw, the downhill play, just outstanding. We mentioned the 4.3 yards per target. That's a terrific number. I don't know how close that is to the top of all linebackers because I always have to calculate yards per target by myself. So if I want to do it, I have to drop PFF's data out into a spreadsheet and screw around with it until I can get that. So I sometimes do that for corners and whatnot. But in this case, it had to be near the top of all linebackers because it's an outstanding number. And it is something that was not right about his game before. Was he was just a step slow reacting to that running back leaving the frame of the pocket and being outside the tackle box and presenting himself as a receiver, and that's something I thought he was much better at this year.
Absolutely. They said there seemed to be games where that was just his main priority, like the Austin. He was all over Austin Eckler when we played the LA Chargers. Right? It just. At the hint of him breaking out of the backfield, PQ was taking the correct angle and just very impressive player. I think that he's going to continue to get better. I don't think that that this is his peak. Although I will say that when his career is done, I may have said this on your show. When his career is done, they'll look back at 2023 as his greatest year because everything was set up for him. So although he'll become a better player in the future, it's hard to do better than what he did this year.
All you have to do is look at Roquan in his years prior to coming to Baltimore and fitting into Baltimore's structure. He's just, I mean, you look at the tape, there's a big difference between when he was playing for the Bears and some of the inconsistency, but a lot of it was the lack of structure, probably trying to do too much around players who clearly were not as good as him. And now coming into a framework where, linemen are where they're supposed to be, and they're actually able to hold off their blocks. And you have a Michael Pierce who can keep somebody from getting up to level 2 and getting a block on you because he holds his double team just a little bit longer. Just a great situation for him to come into, along with the flexibility and a desire from a defensive coordinator to really keep him as the centerpiece of the defense that's shown up since he got here.
And that's a great thank you for saying it like that, because that's what I was getting at with PQ is that, okay, he's going to get better as a football player. He's still young. But what we saw in this structure, in this defense with Roquan Smith and the way that they played together as a unit, was really, really special. And Ken, we've seen this before as Ravens fans over the years with some of these Ray Lewis defenses, the way everybody would just do your job, how Jarrett Johnson knew exactly what he was supposed to do. And, you put Jarrett Johnson on another team, he's not going to be Jarrett Johnson. You put Paul Kruger on another team, he's not going to be Paul Kruger. We've seen it, Adalius Thomas. These guys this year had a specific role and played it so well. And, hopefully that this will translate and bleed into 2024.
Yep. Completely agree. I guess if we're talking about things that maybe didn't go perfectly, I don't know, there's a lot of point in doing this, but we have to mention it when it goes to Patrick Queen. The one way in which he kind of hurt the Ravens this last year was still having problems with tackling consistency. He's had the 10th highest inside linebacker missed tackle rate at 14.6%. So it's basically double Roquan's rate. A lot of that to me is still lacking form as a tackler at this point in his career, which I find strange rather than bothersome at this point. I mean, first of all, it's his problem going forward. It's going to follow him to the market, and it might even affect what he gets paid. This winter. I hope not, but it might, because it's definitely, a weakness of Patrick Queen. But I guess the other thing is, how can he have gotten to this point and not really taken it upon himself to be a better form tackler than he is? He's still a lot of times trying to lay the hit as opposed to wrap up.
That's what I see. I see it. He wants to lay the shoulder in, knockout shot. And then the second part of that, I would say, is he's not one to settle his feet at all. Mm-hmm. Like, he's coming in hot, is the saying goes. So when he does miss, he'll flat out miss. If that linebacker the ball carrier puts a late move on him, he is not settled. He's not slowing down, chopping his feet and making sure tackle. He wants to run through you. And that works against him. So I don't know. You would think that would have been, I don't know. You would figure that was something that would settle down in him by now. Like trying not to make an impression. Hey, not sure, he should feel like in this defense he would have been comfortable. So I don't know. That might always be a part of him as a player.
The guys playing on either side of him are certifiably hard-hitting downhill players, meaning Roquan and Hamilton, who still are great twisters at the point. They grab and they twist and throw down. Matabike, same kind of tackling type. In there, obviously has the arm strength and incredible body torque and whatnot to do it. But it just seems strange to me that Patrick Queen has, on a team that values tackling at such a high level, on a team that talks about it all the time, on a team where there's two great players playing next to him who both do it very well, why he has not improved in that area. Yeah,
I think that, again, he's just trying to make too much. Like, sometimes you got to take a single. You know what I mean? He's trying to hit a home run. He's trying to hit a home run. So, and again, sorry to bring up Trenton Simpson again, but that's something that I think is a strong part of his game.
We'll move on to Trenton now.
Going to be a strong tackler.
Start us off in terms of, I guess, what you think Trenton will be in 2024, because we didn't see too much from him in 23.
I think he can handle being a full-time linebacker and allow them to be a committed nickel defense. I think he can do it. I think that Zach Orr being a former linebacker himself, is going to want to do that. He's going to want to keep the linebacker on the field because he's a linebacker. Maybe that, that's a little psychology there, but if you're a former linebacker, you have Denard Melton on the show. He's going to go to bat for his linebackers and so on and so forth. So I think that he's going to be given the chance, and I think that he ultimately sticks on the field and is going to play close to 100% of the snaps for this team if he's healthy, of course.
It's interesting to see. I'm not willing to project for Trenton Simpson. I mean, I think there's some little trait-based things we can see. We can go back to his play at Clemson certainly and talk about what he looked like there. It's not clear to me he's ready for the full NFL workload. I'm not saying no, but I'm also not saying yes. Let me just put it that way. I think we don't know who this guy is. The most he's ever played in a single game is 26 snaps, and that was in the second half of that Pittsburgh game. Coming in for, he came in for Queen, and then it turned out Phillips got hurt and Queen had to come back in the game. So Queen had to end up playing most of that game, which is unfortunate. The Ravens certainly didn't want to do it that way. But he looked fantastic in that game. I can't specifically say that there weren't conditions in play that were maybe helping him in terms of the field or whatnot, maybe hurting him. Who knows? It's just, I don't think we have enough information yet to say that he will be any specific thing at the NFL level. I think he can be a specific thing at the NFL level.
To be clear, I'm guessing too. You know what I mean? I would just say I have a feeling that he's going to be able to handle it. We don't have the proper information, of course, but if you were to ask me what I expect next year, I would expect him to, if healthy, we're going to stay a committed nickel team because I believe in him. And I thought that from the preseason to that, he got some garbage time too.
Yep.
Throughout the season. From then to that Pittsburgh game, he looked like a more disciplined player, which is one of my problems knocks I had on him. The only real knock coming out of the draft was that he needed to straighten his GPS up. So he would be one of those players that tried to do too much, that would, instead of staying in his gap and waiting for a cutback, would follow the ball, and then the cutback's there and he's out of position and get burned. And we saw that a lot with PQ. But that last game against Pittsburgh, man, did he look very disciplined, stayed in his spot. He was there for everything Pittsburgh was doing with the run game. And they of course, were a good running team when they committed to it with those two good backs. So, obviously, no, I'm not saying that, I have all this information and I'm clearly projecting him to be a every down linebacker. But if I had to guess, I would say I'm higher on him than probably most. And I think that he's going to step in next year and do a good job and allow us to be a nickel team.
Okay. Rank for me this. You have 3 informational inputs on Trenton Simpson. And I want you to rank them in terms of order of importance of how you would project him for the 2024 season. So number 1 is everything he did in college. So it's important information, but it's a little bit older and it's from college. The second one is all the snaps he played in preseason. And I'm actually kind of forgetting how much he played in the preseason. I'll look that up real quickly. I actually think he might have missed some time in the preseason, but I will look it up really quickly here. And then number 3 is what he did essentially in that Pittsburgh game, because I don't think there's a lot to go on from before that. So
right.
And I'm going to look how many preseason snaps he had in terms of order of importance of those inputs. And he played 65 snaps in the preseason. Okay. All in weeks 2 and 3, didn't play in week 1. By the way, from looks of things in PFF, and I got to go back and see if this matches my score, he was terrible in week 2 and real good in the third game against Tampa. So rank those inputs in terms of the importance to you. Okay.
So I would say when it comes to the traits, I've seen the number 1 importance was his college work. So I know I've seen his range. I know he's fast. I know what he is physically, basically by the college. But what's ultimately going to be most important is from his neck up, the mental part of the game, which is what I saw during the regular season, from his progression from what we saw in the preseason to the end of the game. That last Pittsburgh game is what sold me. So I would say that that's what's most important, because I saw a disciplined linebacker. I already knew he was fast. You know what I mean? I already knew he was athletic. I think he ran the 40 faster than Zay Flowers. mean, he's
443. I don't know if Flowers was in that range.
a tremendous physical specimen. 443 for a 238 middle linebacker. So that was part of the reason he was a second round grade. He was one of the last people I gave a second round grade to, because it's hard to find an athlete like that at the NFL level. And then you hear stories come from a military family, head down, hard worker. So I would say, if you're talking about like physically who he is, college, but what I'm putting most stock in is how I saw him progress from preseason, which was rough, running himself out of position. The first couple of, I think he played 6 snaps to one game. He ran himself out of position 3 times in 6 snaps. So then he got better the next time he was in garbage time. And then when he finally got steady playing time against Pittsburgh, like, man, he actually looks like he knows what he's doing here. And if that's what kind of gives me hope for next year.
Okay. So in-season growth. So I would, what I heard from you, though you might have said something different in your own mind, was that the college thing was still the number one in terms of the importance of the input. What he did at the regular season was number 2, but that gives you a lot of information about his head as opposed to physicality, which you think you already knew before from the college game. And then the preseason is the third or much lower item on that list.
I would say the most important to me would be what I saw week 18 in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Really through the regular season. I think the college was important just from I know who he is physically. Like right. I've seen who he is physically, but that only travels. So PQ is an excellent athlete too, and he really, really struggled when he came into the league. That game against Pittsburgh was a year 3 PQ type game.
I would agree. It's a great game.
So it's, to me, that's what's saying, well, wow, this guy, he's got a good head on his shoulders and a good feel for his responsibilities. And with Roquan next to him, I don't see that changing. If he was going to there was no Roquan and you have to throw him at Mike, then, oh my goodness, it's a huge question. But to be next to Roquan, I have a lot of confidence in Trenton Simpson.
Okay. As being who I am, as an actuary and whatnot, I can't put the 26 snaps from week 18 ahead of his entire college career. But that's okay, because his college career is great. And, he's got a lot of positives to take from that. And honestly, some of the other things are necessary and maybe still not sufficient about his college, like the ability to use some of what his understanding of being a safety and seeing the game from that spot in that weak side linebacker spot. And I don't think we've seen enough nearly to know that that's true from that Pittsburgh game, as great as it was. So, sometimes I know not to fall into that trap personally, and I'm not saying you're falling into the trap because you're just making an honest evaluation of your judgments here. But I'd like to not fall into that trap on offensive linemen, where there's a lot of variation in week to week play, and so you'll often see somebody not going through it. But when somebody starts to get it going for a number of consecutive games, like Daniel Fa'alele did at the end of the year, where he's playing all of a sudden at a C level when his entire career he'd been literally like 0.25 lower on a 0 to 1 scale for the some of the rest of his career combined. So it's just amazing to me when I see that kind of a change. But I have a hard time doing it for Simpson. I still don't think we exactly know who he's going to be as an NFL linebacker. I think I know who Zach Orr wants to make him into, but I don't know that we know what he'll be yet.
Yeah, we don't. We definitely don't. But I'm just taking my best guess. Then my best guess is I'm pretty confident in him. I really am. And for that 4th or 3rd linebacker spot, would like to have a veteran. Like if Delshawn can't come back, have somebody else that can play Mike, that can be the Josh Bynes of this defense and leave Simpson where he is all year. So, to round out the group and to look forward, that's kind of how I would add to the group.
Would Delshawn be the guy you'd want at Mike then if that can't work out? Because Delshawn's basically been a will, but I kind of get the impression that he would be okay being put in either spot. Yeah,
I did too. I thought that I thought he played well really it seemed like he was Roquan's replacement, and where Trenton Simpson was Patrick Queen's replacement.
Yeah, it's true. So for garbage time and whatnot, that was generally the way they're doing it. Yeah. Let's talk about Phillips briefly. He played 7%. And by the way, I respect your judgment on this. I'm not banging on you for the sample size issue, Jason. If there's anybody I'd want to come to and really understand, what their thoughts were about a player, it'd be you. And that's
no. And I just wanted to make sure, like, I'm not coming across saying I know I know. I'm taking my best guess. I'm gonna feel like Zach's gonna want this to work, and I think that Trenton Simpson is going to have the right attitude, and I think that they'll work through his growing pains. Like you said, the very first thing he's going to have is bad graded games, but I think they're going to try to stick with him to keep their defensive system like it was this year.
Yeah. All right, let's move on and talk about Delshawn a little bit. He played 7% of the snaps during the regular season, an inside linebacker, by the way. The top two guys average something like 94.5% of snaps for the year. I had this in my notes earlier. What do we got here?
Not only were you getting Pro Bowl level play, you were getting as much of it as they really could handle. It was garbage time.
It was basically every snap except for garbage time and one game off for Roquan against the Steelers. So it was everything. Delshawn, I don't know that they really missed him during the postseason due to an injury, but it did force them to go back to Malik Harrison at inside linebacker very briefly. And we're not going to talk about him, but he played a couple snaps there during the AFC Championship game.
And we give up a punt return for a touchdown.
Yeah.
Which, I'm not a special teams expert, but it was right down the middle of the field. So wonder if they missed him there on that.
Yeah. It was a really strange set of activations for that game, bringing up Chisena for the one game and having him. I know he's a very fast guy. I know you want extra special teams guy, but that was almost like extra special teaming it. And you still have available, if you want, the possibility of coffin corner or direction of coffin corner is that's an ancient term, of course, but the directional punting where you punt the ball out of bounds. The old thing where, who was it? Deshaun Jackson is the one who returned the punt on the last play for the Eagles.
Against the Giants, yeah.
Against the Giants, yeah. So he just punt the ball out of bounds no matter what. And apparently they let up pressure on the play. The punter said, it wasn't my fault. I had to kick the ball to not let it be blocked in that way. And
right.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I'm a big, one of my pet peeves, and this is a small one, John Harbaugh. It's not a John Harbaugh hate, but I feel like we do the short kickoff after we score. Okay. I don't know if you've noticed this, but it seems like we'll always kick it deep. We'll kick it deep. But if we score a touchdown, we're going to try to get that extra 10 yards of field position or get the fumble. And it always seems like they've returned it to the 40 when we do that. It's just like what you're talking about with the coffin corner. It's just like, look, we got Justin Tucker, kick it through the end zone. We got Jordan Stout, pit him against the sideline. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Ken.
We got the Ravens defense. Let them start at the 25 instead of the 20.
Let them start at the 25. Let's not play any games.
It's to me that it was one of the things. I mean, you can't even really pooch in the NFL now because the fair catch is allowed anywhere inside the 25, and you move out to the 25.
Right.
So it's I guess if you fair catch it and then you fumble it and then you fall on it, it's there. It's not at the 25-yard line.
Didn't think of that. Right. I didn't think of that. But that has to be the case. Though.
That has to be the reason why you might ever not fair catch it on a high pooched kick like that. That's deep.
Because if you muff it and I recover it, I'm getting the ball right there, right? So you would have to, if you recover it, you would have to take the ball right there where I would have got it.
I would think so. So, yeah, it's what it is.
I can't. I like that.
Delshawn Phillips not re-signed right now, and I don't think he is anyway. I don't think they signed him to a 2-year deal last year, but he does seem like a guy who will stick with the Ravens as a multi-season, 2-year at a time kind of deals linebacker. Slight bonus to the vet minimum, perhaps. A guy who could potentially, if he's on the second year of a deal, can provide you with extra roster fungibility at the end. That gives you that one extra player you can bring on the roster, like Brent Urban does, or Daryl Worley, or players like that who are good organizational players. They're vet min players, and you can bring them back, and they're not going to double cross you because they'll get a reputation for double crossing you. It's just that simple in the NFL. People act like, oh, anybody could sign him. Then, well, no. Then the player has to double cross the team, and he'll probably never play for that team again. But also, he'll get a reputation for having done that.
Absolutely. And for all the reasons you just stated, I hope he comes back, maybe at a 1 or 2 year deal, whatever. That seems to me the kind of guy that could grow here as a special teams captain and be a backup linebacker if you need him in a pinch, and do a decent job there. And they say maybe play the roster games with him as well. You always need a guy like that.
Yep. Also agree. And he is exactly the type that the Ravens look for, a guy who can provide them something and some flexibility, versatility, insertability on defense, and also be a 4-unit core special teams guy. He's Albert McClellan in that sense. Albert McClellan is incredibly versatile. He played a little bit of down line for the Ravens, even in that first game of 2012 when Suggs was out.
Right.
And then he played some inside linebacker. He played some outside linebacker. Certainly for the Ravens, they played a whole lot of special teams.
So aside from these guys, Ken, looking ahead to 2024, I'm thinking undrafted. Just fill the room up with another couple of undrafted guys where if they get claimed, they don't make the roster, it's no big deal. But try to find your next Josh Ross type player who can maybe stick. But, if you're basically rolling the next season, assuming Patrick Queen signs a lucrative deal somewhere else with Roquan, Del'Shawn Phillips, and Trenton Simpson, and undrafted rookies battling it out.
So Ross never went to IR this year. So he's and he didn't meet the games requirement. So he's still technically a year 2 player next year.
I think so. I looked up over the cap and he was listed on that list. So yeah, I think we have control over Josh Ross next year.
Okay. And for effectively 2 more years as an ERFA and then an RFA year after that. So it's really 3 more years that they control him, 2024 through 26. So if they wanted Josh Ross still to be the guy, they could. There's not the need to reset the clock the way there starts to be in year 3, like I think of it. Now they could do it anyway because they might just find somebody they like a little better, and then 4 years is better than 3 under that circumstance. But they don't have to go out and use a 7th round draft pick to draft an inside linebacker if there's another position they'd rather take a gamble at.
Yeah, so I'm showing free agency 2025 as an ERFA, Ken. So
that's team control.
Basically, we would have him in 2025 as well. Then, right?
No, 26 as well. He'd be an RFA in 26, and ERFA is a 2nd or 3rd year player. So he's a ERFA in 24 and 25. He'll be an RFA in 26, which means we have to tender him. Yeah.
So yeah, he's there if we want him.
Yeah, he's there. He's there for the taking if we want him. If they were going to look for somebody, maybe a 2-down guy from the UDFA ranks that they could stick on the practice squad, and maybe he works out.
Sure. Maybe that's a plan, and I think also it may be a good idea to draft, if we're going to draft someone, to draft a strong safety.
Yeah.
To keep that position to where we can use Kyle Hamilton either at safety or in the slot. I think it would really benefit the Ravens to have good depth, a good strong safety behind Kyle Hamilton when he's there, and a good slot corner behind Kyle Hamilton when he's there, like the role Millett had, to be able to move Kyle around. So let's draft a safety, and if we need to go dime, we can do that too.
Look, I'm all for that. Especially the strong safety is a guy who can move up and play dime. So you want that guy. I guess my question for you is: would you rather be a free safety who's more natural on the back end and cover 2, probably is more natural to the rotational games? I thought Daryl Worley did an excellent job in the little bit of playing time he had this year at it. I think he'd be more than adequate for the position. Problem with Worley this year was he really couldn't stay healthy.
Right. And I don't really have a preference. I think, obviously somebody who has a reputation as a free safety, it's going to cost more draft capital. And I think Kyle could play free safety, but that's not what you want to do with him. You want him to be able to make plays. You don't want him roaming the back and not being targeted,
right? Like
him be around the ball. But yeah, I would say if I had to pick, I would say get your strong safety value. Okay. Don't draft a free safety in the 3rd round because that's where they're going to have to go. We're going to play a lot of split safety, a lot of shell. Just get yourself somebody who can cover half the field.
Yeah. And that they certainly did it with Geno Stone, and they've done it in their history with lots of value in the 6th round, primarily at safety. 7th round, also Ralph Staten comes to mind as a guy. Don't know if he'd be perfect for what we're talking about, more of a classic hitter who also had a few picks in his.
I mean, but look at Chuck Clark. Look at Chuck. Chuck Clark,
a great one. Yeah.
6th round, great linebacker. I think you've said he's had the best time linebacker season in history, and he can cover half the field. You don't want him in the post by himself back there, but he can certainly cover half the field and take that away. And I think that a 5th, 6th round pick to instead of investing in a linebacker, get yourself a good young strong safety.
What if Chuck Clark were to come available?
No, it's tough. It's tough. I don't know. My own personal inclination would be that's over with.
Okay.
I don't know why. Maybe that's out of line. I have no idea, but I think that I don't want to say burn bridge, but I think that relationship ran its course.
They traded him. Obviously, I don't know. I did he ask to be traded? I'm trying to remember.
He asked to be traded, but then decided to stay and mentored Kyle. Took the green dot. Kyle had to play in the slot. But I don't know. And I don't know what kind of deal he signed with the Jets, but I don't feel like I feel like it was more than 1 year deal, wasn't it?
Yeah, I got to look at it. Was it just this last year? I have to go back. I'm not remembering things the way I ought to.
Either way, though, Ken, I would say get yourself a young player. It's going to be here for 4 years.
I think he is released. He's not showing as being signed right now. So I think the no, it signed a 3-year contract in 2020. I don't think he's only listed on OTC as signed through 23. It says free agent to 2024 UFA. So I think the question is this: if he comes back under the Tony Jefferson method, where, hey, I'm a UFA, or sorry, I'm a vet min guy. I'm happy to be here. I don't think there's a lot of demand for Chuck Clark at this point across the NFL. I think we can.
I would love him.
That. Yeah.
I would love him. I say, because he's a dependable guy and a tough guy, and he knows what the heck he is doing. But yeah, I don't know why, but I kind of feel like that's run its course. Okay. I don't know. I feel like there were some sour grapes there. Maybe I don't even have a specific reason, but yeah.
Well, I mean, the green dot has certainly passed on. He won't have that anymore. But boy, I would love. I'd love to have him.
Were there some things said, Ken? Where am I getting this from? Were there some things said when he left?
I mean, there's always a lot of things said on the Twitterverse, on the boards, on whatnot that are about the player that sometimes I can't exactly separate, but I don't remember there being tremendously bad blood over this. They traded him. They kind of I knew they had to trade him in some ways, or they thought they had to trade him. And it just,
because from me being on how big of a Chuck Clark fan I was, how much he did on the all 22 that you couldn't see, that where he was just always in position. And man, if he had to take a running back with a full head of steam and he wasn't in the right position, Chuck would put his head down and take that bullet and stop it right there. I mean, just a tremendously tough player. I love Chuck Clark. So yeah, if he was willing to come back on a vet min, shoot, I'd be right down with it.
Yeah. All right. Outstanding. Jason, always a pleasure to talk football with you. I love getting back together, and obviously we let this run a little long, but that's because I just, enjoy talking about all the elements we haven't been catching up on lately. Let's make sure we do a handful of off-season shows at least, and talk some draft, talk some Ravens history, talk some player development. We'll be doing the 2-player series later on this year. But tell people where they can find your work on Huddle Up Films, or talk to you on Twitter if they want to talk ball.
Sure. Yeah. I add Huddle Up Films on Twitter, and then also just it's highlight season on my channel. So while I'm preparing for the draft and getting all that together, I'm putting out one highlight a day, 7 p.m. every day on a new Ravens. So you can really start to see what made them tick, what made them a good player for the Ravens. As Ken will vouch, it's not a bunch of crowd shots and celebration. It's more of a compilation of plays. And it's not always, their sacks and their interceptions and the big hits. It's the solid plays that they're making. So, Ken and I and a couple other guys were discussing the other day, met at BK. and, what a finisher he is, how good he is at finishing around the ball carrier, whether it's a quarterback or, getting a quarterback hit, even if he's touching, he's a better finisher than some of our edge rushers are, at just finishing the play. You can really pick up those kind of qualities from the video, to see what makes a player great and why they're in the NFL. So, I hope you have fun. It's a tough off season. I find myself getting down about how it ended. I'd take a break and be like, man, I can't believe we lost that game. But to get you through the off season, I definitely have some good videos up there. So please check it out, and feel free to contact with me and interact with me on Twitter as well.
All right. Really appreciate having you on, Jason. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up. Any idea is a good idea. Just hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. I'm always looking for new series ideas. If this is the time of year, if you have that 4-part special, and somebody came to me about the evolution of football, and that was it was a great 4-part series you could do mostly about the rules of football and the changes there. That was a lot of fun to do. If you have that kind of a show in mind, this is the time for it. Off season is the ideal time. Please hit me up, and if you'd like to talk about a specific player in Ravens history who you remember fondly, who isn't one of the Ravens all-time greats in particular, love to talk about that. That'll be a new series that we have coming up. I'll put out more details on that, but if you have a player in mind, I'll get you on the list early so nobody else takes your guy.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
It'd be a lot of fun.
I mentioned Jarrett Johnson. That man, I would have.
Should I put you down for Jarrett Johnson right now?
Jarrett Johnson, Kelly Gregg, Derek Mason. Well, I guess he's kind of a great, but I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. There's a lot of really good Ravens out there. Yeah.
Pick that guy you want to advocate for as your favorite second-tier Raven, and I want to hear from you about it anyway. Jason, really appreciate you coming on again.
Hey, thank you, Ken. Football's family. Appreciate everybody out there too.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.